Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Let the Meat Cake. This episode will cover the autonomous region of Kurdistan, home to the Kurdish people who are considered the largest group of people without a state. We spoke to 2 Kurdish people currently living in the autonomous region about regular life, security, politics, and Kurdistan as a whole. This episode will be split into 2 parts and will be the first of 2 episodes covering Kurdistan. As for us, we are 5th Gen, an information warfare cooperative that aims to shed light on things those in power want to be kept in the dark. We want to give a voice to the voiceless and give people the information they need to thrive in today's fast-paced society that stops for nobody. We hope you enjoy the show.
We have a weapon more powerful than the British Empire, and that weapon is our refusal to bow to any order but our own, any institution but our own.
My name is Hevi and I'm from South Kurdistan or Bashur. I am 20 years old and I study linguistics and literature.
Growing up, you grew up during the Iraq War, right?
Well, I was born in 2002, so when I was born, Saddam was executed. And there was a Kurdish government, so I always lived in an autonomous Kurdistan.
So that's what I wanted to ask is how much did the war actually affect you in Kurdistan? Is it as night and day as people say it is?
Well, I did not live during the war, but for my parents, they've been through the Anfar genocide. Do you guys have any idea of that?
Yeah. So
yeah, it was executed by Saddam Hussein, and they killed about 180,000 people. So they lived through that, and there's a lot of I would say generational trauma because we talk about it often in the house, so I know a lot about it and I know what they went through. But me personally, I have never directly been affected by war because it did not impact the Kurdish region. It was most likely in Baghdad and the other parts.
So it's pretty much night and day when you cross that border into the Kurdish region. It's
we are not
a completely
really,
different country.
Yeah, we're not at all connected to Baghdadi politics unless it's related to us. Because even the Kurdish media do not cover it much. When we watch the news, it's always about the Kurdish region and what goes on in the political parties and so on, the situation, but not outside Kurdistan. It's always inside the KRG.
Is there a generational gap between you and your parents where did they kind of lack as much of a independent identity?
Absolutely, because there's a lot of difference between younger Bashuris and older Bashuris because all our experiences are different. They went through war, they saw all these atrocities, and they were discriminated on the basis of being Kurdish, basically. And us, we have always lived under a Kurdish nation. So I think the older generation really appreciates the achievements more. And in terms of votes, it's always the younger generation that vote for the opposition and the older generation that vote for Parti and Niketi, basically PUK or PDK. And for them, they have different, let's say, attributes also. Most of them can speak Arabic. I would say different behaviors from us because the experience is 100% different.
It seems almost similar to the West.
But one thing to point out, the political parties in the West, it's mostly based on ideology. There's Republican and Democrat, but for us it's mostly on the geographical place. There's Hawler and there's Zakho, the Badini areas, the Surani areas, and it's very, very primitive because their supporters are all my ancestors have fought here and the people I know fought for this party, so I'm loyal to them. It's not intellectual. It's not I agree with their ideas. It's they fought for us and I fought with them and I appreciated their martyrs. This is why I supported them.
I mean, you see this throughout history. In popular fiction, it's like the Bannermen, where you go and you get all your banners together to unite underneath the king.
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings, that's what happens at the end. Anyone who knows what's up sees Kurdistan, and specifically South Kurdistan, as an independent country. So let's talk about the referendum.
Yeah, basically it's a very, very old topic. Even when I was very young, I knew what referendum was. I knew we wanted independence. Even like in school, the teachers would talk about um, self-determination for nations and how it's like a fundamental human right for everybody of people to be able to have their own independence if they wished it. So a lot of people think it's like a recent topic, but it's not. It has been going on for so long. But the first time that was like seriously brought up was during 2014, during the war with ISIS. Masoud Barzani, of course, mentioned it, and they then it was the excuse was because they did not like Nouri Maliki. He was,
who
I
does
think,
though? We wrote an article on the guy. That guy
Yeah.
sucks. He
The
sucks.
Sunnis hated him, the Kurds hated him.
He's the
It
reason
was-
we wouldn't have
Yeah.
ISIS if he wasn't up there oppressing the Sunnis and parking tanks in front of their government
Exactly,
offices.
exactly.
They were in charge of their own government. We had them built up since 2006. There was no reason for any of that shit to go down. He just went full Saddam, and just started oppressing
Exactly.
the other minorities.
Yeah, it was like he was a very controversial figure. Like no one liked him, I think, except the Shias.
Well, even they don't, because now they support the Sadr movement.
Well, I'm not sure about that, but
I mean,
he was like
he's-
very controversial.
He's right underneath them, but a majority of the Shia party is now under Sadr. They don't have a government. They can't form one. Just like Israel right now. Israel's government is collapsing again for like the 18th time in 2 years. Like they can't form a government. It's too unstable. Nobody can agree enough to actually form a government. So it's just not going to happen. They need
Especially
Kurdistan.
because, because like the situation is it's divisive in itself. There's the Sunnis and there's the Shias and there's the Kurds. So I think having a government that caters to all the groups, it's quite impossible.
What do you think about the early solution that they had, where they would just chop Iraq into 3 states, where it would be a Shia, Sunni, and Kurdish state?
Well, this is really ideal for me, but whenever like I bring this up, the Iraqi nationalists accuse me of wanting to divide Iraq, and it's like
Well,
a
they're
piece of cake or
nationalists,
whatever.
so
Yeah, but they do deserve a government. Like the Sunnis, it's like the Shia are in power, they are oppressing the Sunni. The Sunnis are in power, they oppress the Shias. So they definitely need to be like divided.
yeah, and
I
it's
think.
gone back and forth throughout history.
Totally, yeah.
And then throughout the whole region, the Kurds are just in the center of all this chaos.
Exactly. We're always like affected by it negatively. Then Nouri Maliki was he I think resigned, and then he came with his name was Haider al-Abadi, I think. Yeah, he went to power, and so they postponed it. They said, okay, now we will focus on the ISIS war. But we wanted the referendum. It was always going back and forth. No one could like voice any sort of criticism against the government. They would be like, oh, Iraq is worse, just wait, we will be free, we will have a referendum. It was like a device to make us silent about our rights. Like, okay, we are Kurds, for this cause we will be silent until we have the referendum. So it keeps like going back. And Masoud Barzani, in an interview during 2016, he said, before October 2016 we will have the referendum. But then Nechirvan, he came and said, we will focus on liberating Mosul first, then we will have the referendum.
Honestly, I've even the information that I've been reading, the videos I've been watching, the articles I've been reading, I still understand nothing. Now, the one thing that I really, really want to understand is the radical feminism. I'm very interested about this, because one thing that I've always said is that it's not so much the West that needs it, but everywhere else, right? So it's very interesting that that's like a main thing in Kurdistan. It's mostly related to, I think it was the YPJ, that a lot of the fighters are younger.
Mm-hmm.
I had questions about that sort of thing, that
Yeah.
it's like, well, a lot of the fighters are relatively young, which would imply that they started fighting even younger, considering that they're all trained, right? What is the motivating factor for these, teenage girls to go and join a fighting force to defend their land?
I don't know what the name in English, but there's people who talk to these girls, and I wouldn't say convinced, but like they tell them about the Kurdish cause, they tell them about
Recruiters.
the gender cause. Yeah, basically. They tell them about everything that they fight for, and these girls are usually convinced and they go with them, but there's no like forcing involved. But the thing is, why you hear it's kidnapping, their families want these girls back, but they cannot get them back, they're gone.
Okay.
So what they do is that they go to the Turkish medias and they're like, oh, they kidnapped my girl, but there's no kidnapping involved usually.
Okay, so yeah, it is basically just all Turkish propaganda then.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And Syrian.
That's pretty, sure, and that's pretty much what I figured. I mean, you can't. I don't think you can necessarily say like completely rule it out. I think there's all that healthy skepticism sort of thing. Like it's that's where all these conspiracy theories come from. Is like the kernels of truth, which everyone sort of expands on and elaborates and blows up to proportions.
He blocked me a long time ago. You know that one goofy guy who lives in like Sweden or something? Michael, who like says like the weirdest like shit about...
Oh yeah, oh my god. I think his name is Michael Arizanti, right?
Yeah, so he said something along the lines of that the PKK makes the women like basically like cut off their breasts and like become men or something.
Oh my fucking god.
And it's like, and the whole thing is like, I know where this stems from. It's because a lot of them take up vows of celibacy, which happens when you're kind of escaping rape, you know?
Yeah.
They don't really do mixed gendered units. So you'll have the women in their own base and the men in their own base.
I think it's good that there's like this division based on sex, because
I do
in
too.
America and a lot of Western countries, there's a lot of sexual assault and there's a lot of women being like taken advantage of. So women staying together and fighting alone is, I think, more adequate, like better than them integrating.
Specifically with America, they keep trying to do, because women want to fight in America. Like, I mean, if you look at how our country's attitude is, obviously the women want to be on the front lines to fight, right? So they keep on trying to do these mixed gendered integrated units. And it's like, the movie Starship Troopers, that shower scene where all the girls have their tits out and stuff. You can't do that. That's just not going to happen in the military.
Yeah.
And I think that's the main reason why the United States military can't implement this. Israel seems to do it well, but Israel like has a lock on propaganda. So I don't know. Who knows what's going on?
But I heard somewhere that there's like sexual assault in the IDF also. They just don't report it much.
Of course there is.
Kurdish women actually lead the world in female fighters. The percentage of women in the military in Israel is 33%. In America, it's 14%. And in all of Kurdistan, it's 40%.
Well, it started with the PKK because unlike the other nationalist movements that sprouted during that time, that era was like full of nationalist movements going on in all parts of Kurdistan. The PKK had like the women's rights ideology alongside its national ideology, and one of the co-leaders was Sakina. I don't know if you guys know her. She was a co-leader. She was like very, very much friends with Abdullah Öcalan. She was an activist from a very young age. She ran away from a forced marriage. Like, she's an icon. She's like had her own unit of women in the PKK with alongside Abdullah Öcalan. So this like kind of started this woman fighting alongside the men for the Kurdish movements, and it kind of went along in like other parts of Kurdistan also. But even today, it's usually either the PKK or the units somehow affiliated with the PKK that have the most women fighters. But there's like a good amount of women also in the KDPI, a branch sort of party in Iran. They have a lot of women fighters, and also in PAK, PAK, they have a lot of female fighters there also, but they're not affiliated with the PKK. And in the Peshmerga in Bashur, we do have some women fighters, but what I see is that they're mostly used for propaganda reasons. That's not necessarily true, but it's usually when the Americans or someone from the West comes and they make these women to like welcome them and it's like a sort of, they're using them, tokenizing these women.
That's actually a huge part of the IDF as well. I mean, if you look at their the IDF babes, like they all have Instagrams and stuff. It's literally their job to just look cute on Instagram and like take pictures and stuff. And that's what they do for the army.
Yeah. And like these women in the Peshmerga here, they even, it's so unprofessional. They wear makeup. Sometimes they have their hair out. I don't know like how this is allowed in like the military, where you're supposed to be like resilient and adequate enough to fight. I don't think it's professional. Even before the Peshmergas now, you know, during before we had the Kurdistan, before the autonomy, when the Peshmergas were fighting in the mountains, there were a lot of female fighters, but they were not actually fighting. They were the wives of the male Peshmergas.
Where does the militant nature of Kurdistan sort of cease to be needed?
When you are a Kurd, it's never certain. Like, just Bashur is the only sort of autonomy that we have, but even this is not secure, because like Iran is affiliated with the PUK. There's Turkey affiliated with it, with the PDK. Like there's all these imperialist forces within Bashur, and even that autonomy does not completely belong to us, and it could be gone tomorrow.
If the dangers are never going to end, and the 4 regions of Kurdistan are all sort of independent of each other, would working together not aid, like working together more?
I think right now it's impossible for all of them to work together. Even in the south, it's so divided among these political lines and tribal lines.
Yeah, it's like, because it's not just the foreign powers that are trying to divide us. They are 100%, and there's a lot of evidence of that, especially in like Bakur. But within our own people, there's like a saying in Kurdistan, like a proverb, and they say within 10 Kurds, one of them is a Josh, one of them is like a traitor. So like even within us, there's people who are assimilated with like the foreign powers. There is even the Kurds that have power work against each other. We have like PDK working against PUK, and even outside of Kurdistan in Rojhelat, it's basically the Iranian Kurdistan. There's like KDPI against PJAK, which is like a part of the PKK. There's like internal conflicts everywhere around Kurdistan. So I would say that uniting, I wouldn't say impossible, but I don't see that it could be a short-term goal.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think about the Apoist philosophy of just pursuing autonomy within inside these states instead of independence?
I don't think that would work, because for centuries we've tried to make peace with these states. We've tried to work with these states. We've offered like a lot of agreements and so on, but we've always been like stabbed in the back. We have always regretted our decision.
I mean, even the United States does it to you, so.
Yeah, it happened in Rojava. They were supposed to stay and protect the people, but they left.
We also gave Saddam the blueprints for the sarin gas he dropped on you, so.
Oh, wow. That's horrible.
Going back to the Anfal campaign, I wanted to talk about just before it happens. I don't remember all the exact quotes, but they call him Chemical Ali. He actually got and broadcasted on the radio that he's going to go commit genocide with chemical weapons. Then a bunch of slurs about Kurds and how he's going to wipe them all out.
Yeah.
And then he literally challenges the international community, saying they're not going to do shit. And
I think that's why,
you know, they hung him, so they ended up doing shit in the end. So
that's why I think like the US came and executed Saddam. It was not for the sake of Kurds. It was not for the sake of Kuwait or whatever. I think it was just because Saddam was challenging the American authority a lot, and he was supporting.
Saddam had to go regardless. He was much too dangerous in this world. He had to go. It was going to happen. If we didn't do it, Israel was going to do it, or Iran was going to invade and do it.
No, 100%. I agree.
And it would have been messy as fuck if Israel did it, because, oh my God, would that inspire jihadis.
But I think like that's the reason why America attacked. They just knew that he was a dangerous man, and he had to be like, they have to take him out.
It was for America's interests and nothing else.
Yeah, exactly.
It was just like Gaddafi.
I don't think Gaddafi had to die, is all. I mean, his people were very satisfied with killing him, so good for them. But even Saddam, I would have much rather seen his trial be dragged out, and him answer for more crimes and things like that, and even to the end, his propaganda machine, like the way he tried to present himself so regally in court, and the court was a kangaroo court, it was a mess. Like, we knew damn well what was going to happen to the guy. I don't know why they just didn't pick him up back and shoot him at that point, because it's like they weren't taking it seriously to begin with. What happened after Kuwait and the genocide is we actually put no-fly zones in place.
So, yeah, I wanted to ask you what the general opinion of the US is inside Kurdistan, and just sort of general views of the West in general. Like, is it sort of hesitant, sort of optimism? Is it complete distrust? Like, where's the metric sitting at the moment?
I think Kurds are like much more impartial to the West in comparison to the Arabs and the Turks, because usually it's them that like step on American flags, and like they have very, very hostile sentiments against them. But within Kurdistan, and from like my experience with the Kurds, they are very hopeless, like they don't trust them, but there's no like they wouldn't go out their way to have hostile or violent sentiments against them. So I think like although we do not trust them, we do not like count on them, but we are not as aggressive in terms of sentiment as the Arabs and the Turks.
We want to get Kurdistan representation in the UN. I think it's the next logical goal. If the referendum isn't going to be recognized, I think that's the next logical goal. It's just to get somebody in the UN, even if they don't have power, just a figure in a seat there.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Do you think it would change anything?
Well, I think that whenever like a power or some sort of authority supports the Kurds in any way, they would be threatened by the Turkish state. And so subsequently they would like, because after the referendum, the Turkish state collaborated with like Iran and the other states, and they accused Kurds of like, they said the whole referendum is a Zionist scheme. So the whole like Middle East was against us, like the whole.
Well, also they think that the Kurds are going to rise up in their country, so that's why they're coming at you and oppressing you, because they're scared that they'll lose power.
I think that's like an excuse, because they don't want Kurds to hold power anywhere. Mm-hmm. Like even when it's outside of Turkey, even when like, because
that's what I mean.
The referendum was made by the KDP. They support Turkey, but they still did it because they are very Kurdophobic. They really hate Kurds. They just don't want them to hold power.
Well, at least right now, too. I mean, it's like before, even in Iran, they have a little bit of autonomy. But I've been told that the Kurds living in Iran are more okay with being Iranian than having a Kurdish identity. Have you heard anything about that?
Well, I think that's bullshit, because I know a lot of Kurds from Rojhelat or diaspora Rojhati people, and they are much more nationalist than me. And even during the fight with ISIS, it was only the units in Rojhelat that came and aided the Peshmerga in their fight. Also, one thing that a lot of people don't know, during 16th of October, when we lost Kirkuk, but after we lost Kirkuk, before that, when the Peshmerga retreated, the PKK came and the HPG came, and they fought for a short while, but when they knew like there has been a treason going on, they left too. But I think when there's like fights going on, the Kurdish forces are like ready to rejoin and fight together.
So this violence kind of brings you together.
Yeah. So it was after the referendum. Referendum happened because of, well, we got like independent economy, because before that, all our revenue and so on were coming from Iraq. So it was because of the independent economy, we basically exported our own oil outside of Kurdistan. And because of that, the Iraqi federal government, they stopped giving us revenue. So from then on, we were like economically independent. So this like made a foreground for becoming completely independent. There's like a lot of economic problems because the salary is cut off. We were like basically starving for a while, but that's a whole another topic. And also one more thing, during the ISIS war, the Peshmerga took over a lot of disputed areas. They are Kurdish, historically Kurdish, but by constitution they're either disputed or they belong to the Iraqi government. But because of the ISIS war and they run away, the Iraqi army ran away, the Peshmerga took over them. And during the referendum, these disputed areas, they could vote for like independence. And after that, majority voted yes. So there was like operations going on. There was a lot of intimidation going on. And it was, I remember during that time, because like we were like watching the news the whole time. We were scared because there were like threats of attack every single day from the Iraqi army and from the Turkish army. But there were like the videos of Peshmergas coming and saying, oh, it's nothing, you will protect everyone, don't worry. But one day, and I think it happened during the night, PUK, they organized that, hey, you can come take over it and we will run away and no one will know. Because a couple of days before 16th of October, Qasem Soleimani was seen. It was like a whole agreement going on. And the reason was because they were not getting enough oil revenue by PUK. So it was like not for any reason, it was for economical reason, because they wanted like money. They are corrupt as much as PDK. But they were not like, they didn't have the whole disputed areas, because some areas like Makhmur, Bashika and Shangal, they were under the rule of party. What happened is that during the night, not the ones in front, but all the artillery and the weaponry and the soldiers, they left. So everyone had to retreat. But there was like some war going on. There's a leader, a really known leader. His name is Khosrat Rasul. He did not know about the attack, and there's a conspiracy that the leaders in PUK wanted to get him killed because he does not collaborate with them in the terms of like the corrupt. He's not as corrupt as the rest. And they fought, but then they also retreated. But this was like a very bloody fight, because there's a video, I don't know if you guys have seen it. There's like 25 dead Peshmergas because of like the artillery that was shot at them. And it was just like very horrible. But for the morning, when we woke up, what we knew is that like Kirkuk was gone. And it was not just Kirkuk, it was even the disputed areas and the party. The only war, like the only conflict that went on was in Perde. Party fought there, and they did not let Hajj come closer to us, to the KRI. Or I think they would have even taken over it, although there's like the 36 line. It was made by the US. After the Anfar genocide, they said, hey, there's a line, you cannot cross it. So this was where like they stopped, but they stopped before Perde because there was like an active conflict there. But even now, like we really, there's so much damage. We lost more than 30% of the land because of this, agreement, because of this collaboration with the Iraqi government and the Shia militias.
Would you say that for most of your life, your country has been getting better or getting worse?
I would say worse, because before it was bad, but we had our salaries. When we went to Kirkuk, there were Kurdish flags. But now when we go to Kirkuk, there was like a very big Kurdish flag when you went inside, but they destroyed it. They made Iraqi flag in place of it. They put Iraqi flag in the hands of the Peshmerga statue and everything. So we've like completely lost Kirkuk, because I remember going to Kirkuk and there was a lot of Peshmergas, a lot of Kurdish flags all around, and we lost that. And even the money, there's like employment crisis and salary. There's no one taking like salaries. My mom, there was a while, there were like months ongoing, and she still did not receive her salary. And when she would receive it, it would be like half of it, or even like less, a quarter part of it. So we lost the salaries, we lost Kirkuk, and I think it's just like a downward spiral, because now we even have the Turks coming in front.
Do you think the referendum is responsible for losing Kirkuk?
I don't think it's like, I wouldn't blame it on the referendum, because it's a human right. It's the fundamental human rights of every people to choose to be independent. I don't think that was a mistake. So the independence would be great, but the time was not right. And one thing I forgot to mention, there was a movement that started then. It was called Nakher Al-qeada, which means for now, no. Like for now, we will vote no. And the leader was named Shaswar Abdul Wahid. He was saying that this referendum will be a great catastrophe for Kurds because Kurds are not united. And he was ultimately right, because we lost Kirkuk because of the conflict between PUK and PDK. So I think if we were united and they were not corrupt and they were not taking the oil revenue for themselves and they were actually serving the people, the referendum would have been great, because imagine if the Peshmerga fought back in Kirkuk. We would have gotten a lot of things like a lot of recognition, but we lost everything because there was no unity and there was a lot of corruption and the people not supporting the government and the people being poor, not having salaries. The time was not right, the cost was right, and the intention partially was right.
Do you think that Kurds would be united if it wasn't for the government?
Yeah, because we have a lot in common. Like we share the same language, we share the same culture. It's only the borders that like separate us. Otherwise, we are like one people and we have one cause. All the movements, no matter how much conflict they have, how corrupt they are, they all have one goal, and it's an independent Kurdistan. So I think Kurds would like be completely united if it was not for these leaders that were causing us to fight against each other.
What does it mean to you? Like, what does being Kurdish mean to you?
Well, that's a weird question. I was born a Kurd. I speak Kurdish, and I have been around Kurds my whole life. So I think it's language, it's culture, it's a shared identity. It's having one cause, one I think one destination, sort of one goal, and because even a lot of Kurds, they are by blood Kurds, but they do not like support the independence, and they support like the invaders and so on. I don't think they're Kurds. So I think it's not just the language, it's not just the blood, it's also this loyalty to the Kurdish cause.
It was good. There was a lot of very, very interesting information.
Well, because you said before, is this you after everything that you've learned on it, you understand nothing. How do you feel now?
About the same.
In terms of what?
About the same. So we need another one. We need another one. You still feel like you know nothing.
I'm very. It just seems like it's a very dense subject. There's a lot of history that's sort of lost between the margins.
And most people don't know they exist.
Well, there's that too, because I didn't know until
people only knew during the
years ago.
ISIS war.
That's the only reason I know, is because of ISIS.
Yeah.
Which is ironic, isn't it?
It was like we didn't exist beforehand. I would just say I'm Kurdish, and they were like, "What's a Kurd?" And one funny thing, once I talked to this LGBT activist, I talked with her, and I told her like I'm Kurdish, and she was like, "Oh, sorry, what's Kurdish? I'm not trying to be offensive." She thought it was a sexuality. Yeah.
That's very funny. It's very interesting, and I'm sure that Kurdistan is not the only place that's like this. Like, I'm sure that there's heaps of these sort of places, these autonomous regions.
They're the biggest minority without a country, so by that definition, they're the most oppressed people on earth. There might be worse things going on right now happening to other people, but as far as like scale and by definition and metrics, they're the most oppressed people on earth.
Period.
We do get along great with the Kurds. We're trying to help them a lot. Don't forget, that's their territory. We have to help them. I want to help them. Go ahead. What's next? They fought with us. They fought with us. They died with us. They died. We lost tens of thousands of Kurds died fighting ISIS. We don't forget. I don't forget. What happens someday later, but I can tell you that I don't forget. When Iraq was fighting the Kurds, everybody thought we were going to fight with the Kurds. I said, well, it's a little strange that we're fighting with the Kurds when we just spent $4 trillion on Iraq, and now we're going to be fighting Iraq. So what I did is I said, we're not going to take a position. Let them fight themselves. I thought the Kurds would do very well. Everyone said, oh, the Kurds will do very well. Well, Iraq moved in and the Kurds left. They didn't fight because they didn't have us.
Okay, so I'm Dawra Mahmoud. I'm Kurdish and I'm from Kandil Mountains, which is the main PKK's base is there, and I'm a third stage student of filmmaking department in University of Suleiman.
And I heard you were doing a documentary the other day.
Yes, I'm in the like the development stage or course, and it's about water sensitivity and water pollution reduction, and
How long have you been doing that for?
it's been like when I was grade 11. It has been 5 years ago, the idea, and 4 months ago I started scripting it and making it. So I'm raising funds now for the documentary to shoot it.
We can start to talk about the claw operations that have been ongoing with Turkey in the area. I believe, didn't your village get bombed?
Yeah, I'm right now in Kandil, and last night there were so many bombings in the mountain Karok behind us. So we could not move our car in the villages and turn them on. We were not this year. We are not able to take any pictures, cell phones, cameras in the Kandil mountains, even in our villages, in our gardens.
That's interesting you say that, because I'm so used to seeing, like, you'll see smoke clouds coming from the mountain and someone be like, this place is being bombed, and it has been a minute since I've seen that.
Is that just operational security sort of stuff? Is that coming directly from the forces fighting, or how does that work?
Yeah, it's directly from the PKK, and like if you have seen videos like those who are the smoke coming out from the mountain, the person who shot that video will be in trouble because the security forces in the mountain is now, in the villages now, are going through every house, every household, and check them all securely to not use any photos or any suspicious actions.
Do you find that you are catching it's trying not to use euphemisms, receiving aggression from both sides, whether that's the PKK or it's whoever, the Assad or whoever?
I think I'm receiving and catching aggression from the Turkish side and Islamism side, not the PKK or Rojava side, because the thing with PKK and their rulers, or everything about them that they do to people in the villages that they don't like, are logic thing is like, now the checkpoints are in the villages, and people are so angry about this, but it's their only solution.
So you're saying they just have no choice?
Yeah, they have no choice.
That's a common thing, A lot of times how I feel with Rojava is like a lot of the things that they have to do, they have no choice.
Yeah, and the people don't understand. Like they say the PKK or Öcalan were from the northern Kurdistan, like Bakur. Why not they go back to their Kurdistan?
This is a criticism that I used to have, and I kind of swallowed it since then. And I realized that who it was coming from, and it's not really like parties from inside the state. If they're fighting Turkey, why don't they go to Turkey? I've said that before in the past, and I can understand why people would feel that way.
Yes, but they are treating the Kurdish question as the Kurdistan is all one part, not Bakur or north or east or west. I think that is the thing.
Do you feel that it's all one region, or do you still feel that it's divided?
It is politically divided, and unfortunately there are borders, but it is the greater Kurdistan already. So we had a country, we had a history older than most of the nations in the Middle East. It is an ethnic. We have the oldest language or anything you say about humanity. The first civilization.
One of the first civilizations. Yeah, one of the oldest
Yeah.
continuously inhabited cities.
So
Right.
how would you say public support in Kurdistan is for groups like the PKK? Is it sort of the same spot it has been for a while? Is there more support? Is there less support? How is the general feeling in Kurdistan?
Yeah, the public support for PKK is decreasing day by day because the news agencies are spreading false facts about them, and like it's PDK and PUK or Turkey, they are both together making them the devil, and the people are believing them because people are bored too. They are tired too. They are tired of all the political parties in southern Kurdistan. So the thing is not only with PKK, I think, because they are tired of all political parties, and they say it's been like more than 20 years, and they did nothing. They did nothing, but I say here's Rojava. They made Rojava.
I can certainly understand why people would feel like that, though. How about Turkey? How do people feel about Turkey?
The most common thing you will face when you come to southern Kurdistan is the assimilation made by Turkey of the Kurdish people. Soft force, which is cinema and advertisement, like their products also, like their food is or anything in Kurdistan. Most of the things in Kurdistan, especially the food chain, is being imported from Turkey, and there's a lot of TV series, Turkish TV series in.
So there's a lot of soft power coming from Turkey.
Well, what I was going to ask is, do you feel like they're using capitalism as a weapon?
Yes, and it is happening since 2011. They are spreading the soft power in southern Kurdistan, and they have succeeded in that. Yeah, I can see that. You can see that. Everybody can see that they have succeeded in that, and they have assimilated most of us, and we see them as a developed country, a peaceful country.
So do you think that's where opposition to the PKK comes in? That this soft power spreading through southern Kurdistan has influenced the opposition to the PKK and what they're doing?
The thing I talked about was some of the biggest reasons, but there are a lot of reasons which are happening daily, like the news and the propaganda made by the southern Kurdish political parties against the PKK. So the people's mind are being washed.
So does this affect the other Kurdish areas, or is it just, do you think, southern Kurdistan that's specifically taking the brunt?
Yes, that was a great question, because the PDK have also many followers in Rojava, the PDK party, which is
I just want to interrupt for 1 second. Sometimes people know them as the KDP, and I just want to be clear that they're the same group. They're just switching letters around.
Yes.
Sorry, continue.
Yes, KDP. So they have a lot of followers in Rojava, and even they have a army in they have about 14 to 11,000 soldiers.
Like they're on the border, or do they operate in Rojava?
Both. They even have so many followers in Rojava, like the eastern Kurdistan, and one of the oldest political party of Eastern Kurdistan, the Democratic Party of Kurdistan, Iran, is now one of the branches of KDP, which is the Democratic Party of Kurdistan, Iraq.
Of the 4 regions of Kurdistan, north, south, east, west, what ones do you think have the best relations together?
None of them, unfortunately. Yeah. We don't have much connection with each other. I was always complaining about that, like the southern part and the Rojava part. We are both having our autonomous region. We should gather, we should connect with, we should be one autonomous region, the Rojava and the South Kurdistan. But there are different political parties in Rojava, and I think it is anarcho-communism in Rojava, and there's another thing in Bashur. There isn't a stable political system. The democratic system is being. There isn't democratic system in Bashur actually, but like the 2 governators or the.
I have a graphic too. It's right here behind me, so I'll be throwing up full screen.
Yeah, the yellow one, the yellow one, KDP, is being running in Duhok and Erbil, which is Erbil is the capital, and the PUK, the green one, is in Halabja and Soleimani, which we had Kirkuk before, and they sold it, which Kirkuk was, they sold Kirkuk and Shingal, which were the 51% of southern Kurdistan part in 2016 to Ajd al-Shabi. After the referendum, so after the referendum, Hashd al-Shahbi, which is the people's voice, I think, they attacked the both cities and they just handed them.
How has that affected you economically? Because a lot of people in Erbil, Howler, I've heard a lot of stuff about how losing Kirkuk has really affected a lot of jobs and salaries. How are you feeling about that?
I don't know about that. I don't have much information about that, but to me, it hasn't affected me so much. But it was better before the referendum. Like the things were cheaper and I don't know. It's confusing actually. You're right.
Yeah, it is. Kurdistan is confusing now.
Yes, actually it is.
There's a lot of information.
So any day is a new rule. Any day is a new law. Any day is a new system. We don't understand. We are confused, all of us.
Well, this leads into a question I wanted to ask: is how is life for I guess the regular Kurdish person?
This year we have been going through, I think, the most crisis, like the gas price rised up, and when the gas price rised, taxi owners demonstrated, protested. When the student aid haven't been paid, the students were protesting. So there were a lot of crises, but we were all protesting differently, and we had the same problem, but we were protesting differently in a different situation for a different issue, but our question was the same. It was the bureaucracy, it was the capitalism, it was the authority, it was the privatization, a lot of much stuff
and
like this.
That's the hardest part, is that it's the the individual person, a student doesn't have money to fund an entire ad propaganda campaign. So how it's
Right.
just how they use it as a weapon to divide people.
So I want to talk about an interesting thing, which will, I'm sure you two both will like it. So it is like a theater play. The government and the political parties make crisis. The people rise.
Yeah, so
the
they
people
make
protest.
crises so they can kind of come in and solve it, and then people start to like the government.
Yeah, but there's
Regular
another
playbook.
thing. There's another thing. The people who are protesting and demonstrating are the political parties themselves. They are members of them. Like
Psyops.
for instance, for your image, in the students' protest is like in University of Soleimani, which I talked about earlier. I'm a student of there. So the protests were 2 weeks, and between the 2 weeks there was another week between them, which they closed the university. So all of them went home. So the first week the protests were so crowd. So the most students were protesting in there, more than any Kurdish cities, more than any demonstration and protests ever done in Bashur, bigger than the rise up in the 1991. Student leaders of the protests and the demonstration were members of PUK, which PUK controls Soleimani. So the second week, all of the students who were protesting and were not members of PUK got arrested and were held in prison for like 1 week or 2 weeks. And they were, after they got released, they signed up like an agreement, or I don't know the name. So it was like a vow or anything, not able anymore to protest or demonstrate.
Okay,
or
so a
they-
non-disclosure agreement.
Yes, they would pay if they were doing it again. So the second week, I was the one who made the protest and the demonstration, because there were no students left to be a leader or to organize the asked to join the political party PUK. I mean, and they all accepted. So I was the only one left. I was the last one, and I organized a protest inside the university. I gathered all the students of the colleges, from the Fine Artist College till College of Language. So when we all gathered, I was all alone from the early morning. When I gathered them all, it was I was not seeing the end of the people of the demonstration. I decided for them to go along the streets, like it was the main street of Soleimani city. It was like the main vein of Soleimani. So we blocked the street, and after that, the students themselves, some of them, they were spy and
Yeah, they were
forces.
informants.
Yeah, informants. So they arrested me, and like it was 621 students were arrested before me for the same reason, but I was the only one who got who made a court for me. Like it was a real judge and two detectives. They started to investigate from my dad's biography, history, to to why I organized the protest, and like the other students were arrested, they paid like 200,000 Iraqi dinars, but mine was 2 million Iraqi dinars. I paid 2 million Iraqi dinars to, as like we say, kafalet.
Yeah.
So they
literally
take,
the opposite. You needed money for your education, and they took it from you.
right.
That's what it sounds like. And what, they just shut down the protests? Why? Because they just didn't want them? Like, what was the reasoning here?
I don't know. PUK was coming to the protests and were supporting us to against PDK, and PDK was coming inside the protests and supporting the students to go against the PUK. So we were confused. Which side are you in? But the main target was the government. But they were shutting down the protests. I don't know why. Because I got in court. I even signed a paper which the judge wrote. But I still don't know why I got arrested.
Do you think Kurdistan could unify in order to solidify their position in the area, as opposed to having all these different regions of Kurdistan fighting each other while fighting other people? How do you think? What do you think would be the best method for them to unify, to be able to actually, I guess, go beyond the point that they're at now?
Also,
So
do you think it's possible for them to unify?
that was the better way for asking this question, because I say that, but don't accuse for the information, because I'm an anarchist, but I don't say that because I am an anarchist, but I don't have any hope for unifying any unifying from them, and there's no hope actually.
Let's not use the word unity. Let's use cooperation. Is there a middle ground that all four regions of Kurdistan could reach in order to cooperate with each other to at least secure their own autonomy?
Yeah, but we are not able to do that because we have great obstacles like the PDK and PUK, or like the intelligence agencies of Iran and Turkey. Many other things.
So it seems like the issues are always coming back to the political parties.
Yeah, because they have most of the power and most of the oil mines or wells, and most of the humanitarian resources, most of the
So
natural resources.
Yeah, it's the resource control that the centralization of the
Right.
power has taken. Yeah, okay.
Right.
So-
You also
I think
have all these forces coming in from the outside, so you have countries on all sides pressing them as well. So it's like
Right.
you have the division internally, and then you're also getting divided by 4 different powers as well.
Exactly. But all I think about, all I want to do is just leave here and join a hippie community or something. But yeah, cause I'm not seeing any hope here. But the only thing I'm happy about here is we got a lot of problems. So I, as a young documentarian, can document most of them in tricky ways, but I don't know.
So sometimes the best thing you can do is just to document it because think about it, it's like movies where it's like the end of civilization, so they have to leave a message for the next. Some things you just can't achieve in this lifetime. So you need to keep the dream alive for the next one.
Correct. But as I see, the coming generation is getting way worse than us. Like
you have to believe that the revolution is inevitable.
Yes. Like the difference between our generation and the coming generation in Kurdistan is we don't know what is going on, but they don't know where they are.
Yeah, it seems like the issues are far deeper than we have time to really get into.
Well, that's why we're doing multiple segments with multiple people. So
actually,
I think you're right. The documenting it is probably. I mean, if you have no hope, I guess that's just. But then you've got the thing that you were saying before about them putting down, like suppressing footage and photos and use of that sort of stuff. I mean, that really seems like you're between a rock and a hard place. So it's
you get so many obstacles documented. This stuff is like if you are documenting in Erbil or Dohuk, you should get permit from PDK, and you should have their same political background and have faith in the Sultan or the Turkey or Halabja or Kirkuk.
Okay, so it's a conditional license.
Or Iran. Yeah, and even I'm as I talked about that earlier. I'm making a environmental documentary film. I still get great obstacles like we have the little Zap River, which makes 60% of Tigris River. So we have Tigris and Euphrates in Iraq, which Mesopotamia was
the land of the two rivers.
Those two rivers, yeah. So we have little Zap river, which makes 60% of Tigris River, and it comes from Kandil Mountains. So it goes back to the other Kurdistan part, like the eastern Kurdistan part, and they have made 4 dams in the Kurdish cities and bending the water in the opposite direction for the Turkish cities and for their agriculture. So the little Zap River got dried up. This is what Iran does to the rivers that spring there. So they make dams and bend the water in the opposite direction for agriculture and other industrial uses. But in Turkey, the thing is much bigger than this. They have 2 projects, the GAP project and the DAP project. Yeah, we have GAP is a small one, which is the grand one is DAP, because GAP contains 20 dams, but DAP contains more than 60 dams, and all of the dams are upon the Tigris and Euphrates River. The DAP project hasn't started yet, but the GAP project has started last year, and out of 20 dams, only one dam has been opened officially this year, and just because of one dam, only one dam, a lot of civilizations has appeared in like the cities of Duhok, like Zaho. I talked about the little Zap River. Iran dried up that river. We have historical civilizations are being appeared in the water, because
so they were like buried
into the water. The flood season come get damaged, and a lot of other stuff is displacing people also.
And I've seen a lot of stuff at just like
deforestation,
because it all goes down, right? So it's like a lot of people in southern Iraq are just going to get it harder from all these dam projects too. And so there's a lot of people whose lives are being destroyed all throughout the entire river because they're putting these dams at the source of the river.
Yes, we have the Arabian Gulf, or the Iranians say it's Iranian Gulf.
Yeah, Persian Gulf.
Yeah, Persian Gulf, right. So the main source of the Persian or the Arabian Gulf was the both rivers of Euphrates and Tigris, but they are not reaching the Arabian Gulf anymore.
And Saddam did a lot of environmental destruction too, down there in the south.
Course,
but that that's a story for another day.
Yes, actually.
What do you feel is the Kurdish identity? What is being Kurdish to you?
I think being Kurdish is like, I'm an anarchist, but I love my ethnic, I love my nation, because I speak this language, I read poetry in this language, I read literature in this language, I do love in this language. So, as Emil Shuran says, we don't live in country, we live in language. So language is our real home. And I see the Kurdish language as the oldest and the most ancient language, or among the all other languages in the world. You see, they are all derived and came from the Anatolian.
Gaelic comes straight from the region. Gaelic is influenced by Iran and Kurd, and it was Correct. It went through Europe and it got way warped from there. But there's a lot of vowels that sound very similar in Gaelic and Kurdish, in certain Kurdish dialects, Correct. Not all of them, but more of the Anatolia dialect. Speaking of Gaelic, not that long ago, we're talking 100 years ago, people in Ireland were being killed for not saying their name in English when they were asked to identify themselves by police. If they didn't respond in English, they would be executed on the spot. And I want to talk about how the extinction of language is being used by regimes like Turkey, how you can't even say the word Kurdistan there, and it can cause problems if somebody hears you, and how other Kurds are the ones that you have to worry about more than the actual Turks.
The Turkey was in Turkey like a decade ago. They were the three words were forbidden: Kurdish, Kurdistan. So anyone who uses this three words were being executed. They were not able to speak Kurdish. The greatest example is Musa Antar. It was like the most famous Kurdish journalist and author. He got arrested, life in prison for speaking Kurdish, even when his mother visited him her mother was not knowing Turkish, so she was just sitting and holding his son's hand, not being able to speak their language. He died like that. But today, Turkey is working in a different way, opening Kurdish language learning courses for even Turkish people. And
So
I
it's
think
getting
the
a little
reason
bit
for
better?
that is, yeah, but the reason for that, I think, is they have the Ottoman Empire again, so they want to buy the faith of northern Kurdish people, and even when they control southern Kurdistan, they don't want the northern Kurdish people go against them.
Like what you just said, because like I've never had that thought process. Like that was like a life-changing thing. Like I like so many things are going on in my head right now, and so many like philosophies that I've had are changing right now because I never thought about it that way. Like
So in Iran it is getting worse because teaching anyone Kurdish is like one of the hardest thing. Is like last year, Zara Mohammadi, which was a Kurdish teacher in Senendej, like the Kurdistan province, got sentenced for 5 years in prison just for teaching kiddies Kurdish language, their Kurdish language, because we have a lot of Kurdish people in the Eastern Kurdistan who are not learning Kurdish, and they are not being taught by their parents because their parents are being afraid of the regime of the state, and they just teach Persian to their
Farsi.
children. Yeah, Farsi.
I mean, that's very concerning. That sounds exactly like what China's doing.
Heavy basically said exactly the same thing about language that you did. And that just goes to show you how important that is. And that's why it's the first thing that they're always going to attack. I've always been like, maybe it will get better when Erdogan is gone, but do you think that the next person will come in and just have more of that subversive agenda where they'll just kind of make the Kurds like them just to rebuild the empire, right?
Right.
See, that was a little dial of hope that I had. Like maybe it could get better, and then you just destroyed that for me, man. The Ayatollah is going to die soon, so let's hope that afterwards that they don't allow another one to come in, and maybe things will be
he'll
a
go,
little better.
Assad go, and Erdogan will go, and maybe all the problems will be solved.